Hello, my name is Richard Leider. I'm founder of InVenture, the Purpose Company, located in Minneapolis, Minnesota in the U.S. And it's my privilege and my pleasure to be with you today to do what I call a purpose checkup. Now, you might take your car in for a checkup, you might do a physical exam, a physical checkup, a financial checkup, but as leaders and as human beings, it's good to do a life checkup occasionally, to push the pause button and step back and look at the big picture and look at what you want to change or how you want to grow and different elements of your whole life. So let's dig in here with this purpose checkup. I'll do the checkup, and I will also share with you 3 practices. I think leaders today want practices. They want things that work, things that they can take away. So I will leave with you 3 practices, and one of those practices you'll be doing at the end of this videotape. So let's start by saying this, that if you have a pulse, you have a purpose. You have a reason for being here. I have been a student of purpose now for 40 years. I studied it in school. I've studied it by interviewing thousands of people and writing about it and reading about it. So let me share some of my insights. One of my colleagues has programmed his answering machine on his phone in this way. It says, when you call him and he answers the phone, it says, at the sound of the tone, please leave your answer to life's 2 eternal questions. Number 1, what do you want? And number 2, who are you? Well, basically a purpose checkup is about who are you and what do you want and what are the practices that will really get you there. So let's take a look at this. The first question basically is, what is your why? Purpose is the answer to the question, why? Why do you get up in the morning? And one of the things that I will come back to over and over again is this. Purpose is not a luxury. Purpose is fundamental. It's fundamental to health, it's fundamental to healing, it's fundamental to happiness and longevity. And it's also fundamental to leadership and productivity at work. So I want to share with you why that's the case and why it's not basically a luxury. So what is your why? Why did you get up this morning? Why do you get up on a daily basis? Many people have what are called the Monday blues. They don't want to get up and go to work on Monday morning. There are a lot of health problems that happen on Mondays. Things like this for people who work hard, and you work 60% of your life's time is spent working. It's a big investment. It's the biggest investment of your most precious currency, your time. So you want to make that to be a good investment. I have studied purpose in the neurology labs, in the neuroscience labs. And I was visiting with a neuroscientist who talked about this particular slide right here. He said that he had a person that he was treating for Parkinson's disease, and the guy really just wanted to die. He was at an age where he just said to the doctor, let me go, this is miserable, I don't want to live this way. And then something happened. His mother got sick. And he was a sole single child, had to take care of his mother. And so all of a sudden, he had a reason to get up in the morning to get out and take care of his mother. Well, guess what happened to his Parkinson's? It didn't go away, but it improved in certain ways when he was giving to others, in this case his mother. He was not self-absorbed and he was better himself and healthier. And so purpose is always about the giving. His mother then died. And he went into another funk and said to the doctor again, just let me go, I'm done, she's gone, my reason for getting up is over. And then all of a sudden this cat named Sadie showed up. And all of a sudden he said to the doctor, you can't let me die now. Sadie needs me. I got to take care of Sadie. So you see, the point here is having a why outside of yourself is the core of purpose. It is the power of purpose. It's bringing who you are to others in many different ways. Another neuroscientist that I visited with, his name is Dr. Majid Fatoui. He said this, very famous neuroscientist. He said this, he said, Richard, and he held up a pill. He said, imagine a pill. And then he said, what would you pay for this pill? This pill will reduce the effects of Alzheimer's by a significant amount. It will reduce the incidence of macroscopic stroke by 41%. It will improve your sleep and sleep apnea and other sleep disorders. And he went on talking about this pill, and he said, Richard, what would you pay for this? And I said, I don't know. I mean, a lot, probably, but is it available? And he said, well, you know it is. It's free. It's purpose. And purpose, having a reason to get up in the morning, isn't going to cure all these things, but it is going to bring a quality of life to us in many ways. So let me give you the prescription right now, because it's not going to be long, and you're in the healthcare business. Tell the healthcare industry and doctors start prescribing purpose. Having a reason to get up in the morning is part of our well-being. And so let me give you the pill, the RX, right up front here. No one can leave after watching this video and say, I don't know what my purpose is, because I'm going to give you the purpose right now. And it is this. It's only 2 words: grow, give. If you get up in the morning and you get up with an intention to grow, to learn, and to give that day a small something to others, that's it. That is the universal default purpose: grow and give. Now, I'll share some practices in a few minutes about how to grow and give. But before we do that, let's dig into purpose at a little bit of a deeper level. When I got out of, I'm a counseling psychologist by background. When I got out of counseling graduate school, trying to figure out what to do with the rest of my life, I found that this man, Viktor Frankl, was giving a seminar in San Diego, Southern California. I had just studied him in school, and all of a sudden, this famous man was going to be giving a seminar 5 days, and I went there, and it changed my life forever. You've all had fortuitous encounters with others that were unexpected, that all of a sudden were game changers for you and your mindset and your attitude in different ways. Well, Dr. Frankl, for those of you who don't know him, and I would guess many of you might have heard of him before, wrote a book, a very famous book, millions of copies sold, called Man's Search for Meaning, Man's Search for Purpose, if you will. Frankl was a neurologist, psychiatrist in Vienna, Austria, and at the height of his work training residents in what he called logotherapy or meaning therapy, he was taken by the Nazis, and his family, his pregnant wife Tilly, and his parents and his brothers, sisters, all taken by the Nazis. Boxcar, Auschwitz, they all died. Every one of them died except Viktor. Viktor survived 4 years of concentration camps, was liberated out of Auschwitz, came back to Vienna, healed, sat down and wrote Man's Search for Meaning in 9 days. And the heart of that book, and the heart of my lesson learned from him, is in this quote right here. He said this: the last of the human freedoms is to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances, to choose one's way. Well, obviously a concentration camp is not a choice one would make, and is not a pleasant, it's a horrific situation. But he said, in the concentration camp, if you had a why, a reason to get up in the morning beyond yourself, to help somebody else, first of all, with a reason to live yourself, a reason to get up in the morning, but then giving somebody else a kind word, giving somebody else a crust of bread, a hug, giving somebody else hope. That's the paradox of choice. We have to choose our own way. but purpose is lived out, and we survive and thrive if we connect to others and start to give to others, grow and give, as I talked about earlier. So every one of us has our own story. The old story, the story I grew up with, looked like this. And that story basically, on the bottom line, is childhood, adolescence, adulthood, retirement, old age. Grow up, decline, grow old. And life used to be shorter than it is now. We've added about 3 decades to life. I know in the States, in the US, that the average life expectancy in 1900 was age 46. Now it's in the 80s, and the fastest growing cohort is 85 and over, and there are 4 times more centenarians, people living to 100, than there were a decade ago. So we've added quite a bit to life for the sake of what? What do we do with this longer life in certain ways? Today, people are not just growing up and declining, they're growing up and they're growing, not only growing old, but they're continuing to grow whole throughout life. And that's one of the choices. And here's the new model. The new model looks like that. The new story that I've been studying for the last decades looks like this. It's the same bottom line, except you can see there's a new life stage. There's adulthood in the middle, and then there's that dip, used to be called the midlife crisis. I call it the midlife slump, or the U-curve, they call it in certain ways. But then look at how it goes up, and how happiness and fulfillment and personal growth goes up in the last phase of life. That's the possibility for all of us today in our work and in our lives. Now, I've been interviewing elders over the age of 65 since the 1970s. I was part of something at that time called the Harvard Study of Adult Development, which is the longest standing study of adults over their whole lifespan. And I started then to do my own interviews after that, and I asked older people over the age of 65 who had retired in many instances, in most instances, if you could live your life over again, what would you do differently? And here's what they said, 3 things. I hope you'll remember these 3 things. Number 1, they said, if I could live my life over again, I would be more reflective the next time around. Reflective means they would step back and look at the big picture. And oftentimes people are reflective when there's a crisis. Cancer, financial problems, relationship problems, work problems. Then we're forced to push the pause button, step back. What we're doing here in this conference and in this videotape is being reflective. So I hope you'll find this to be useful as part of the wisdom that elders have passed on to all of us to be more reflective. Secondly, they said they would be more courageous the second time around. In the area that they would be most risky or have the most courage in, and I know courage is one of your top values. It's the value of the year. What is courage? Well, courage is really stepping into the unknown in many ways. And the area that they would be the most courageous were 2, work and love, work and relationships. They wish they would have found a better fit in the work world because that's where they spent so much time. And they wish they would have been a better parent, a better spouse, a better friend, a better on and on. So those 2 areas. And I said, why be more courageous? And they said, aliveness. We feel most alive when we're really on our growth edge and when we're learning and growing in many ways. Third thing, so we have reflection, we have courage, and the third thing was purpose. Every single person I've ever interviewed has said this: I want my life to matter. Mattering matters. I want to leave my thumbprint, my footprint, my dent in the universe. And in certain ways, as the late Steve Jobs said, I don't want to be the wealthiest man in the graveyard. I want to leave a dent on the universe, which he obviously did. And so if you step back and you look at the elders, there's 3 M's to sum it all up: money, medicine, and meaning. Just to summarize what I learned from these older adults, obviously we need enough money to live a good life. And we also need enough medicine. And medicine is really what you are all about, and that's healthcare and well-being and wellness. And the third thing is meaning. What if you have enough money and you have enough health? What do you do all day? What is your life all about? Meaning. So the 3 M's, money, medicine, and meaning. So let's look at purpose across the ages. We all have our story about purpose. And so what we're doing during this checkup is looking at your story. One of the stories that most profoundly affected me, I was giving a seminar, and I got a message. Someone walked into the front of the room and handed me a slip of paper. It said, "Call home now." I called home, and my wife said, "Richard, your mother has had a stroke. She's in intensive care in St. Joseph's Hospital, and she's not going to make it through the night. You better come home." Fortunately, I had a colleague with me who could take over the seminar or the workshop, and I drove home that night, and I got to the intensive care unit late at night, walked into intensive care, and there was my mother gasping for breath. I asked the intensive care nurse if she'd just leave me alone in the room for a few minutes. My brother, my wife, etc., were not there, and so I didn't know what to do, and I just lost it. And then I figured, we all want our lives to matter. So I just got up on the bed, and I said only 2 things to my mom. I said, first of all, "Mom, I think it's time to go." And then secondly, I said, "Thank you." And when I said thank you, she opened her eyes, took 2 more breaths, and died right there in my arms at that moment. And I tell you this story because you're in the well-being business. You're in the sustainable life business. And every single human being wants their life to matter. She was a stay-at-home mom with 2 kids. I was one of those kids. I was there. She, I believe, wanted completion. And so that's one part of that story. The other part is that this purpose thing, you can't always see it, you can't always weigh it, can't always measure it, but you know it when you're around it, and you know it when it's gone. For her, it was gone. Her life was over, and she had made her dent, and she, I believe, I feel, had that sense at some level of consciousness of completion. We all want our lives to matter. Mattering matters. So wherever we are on the curve, we have purpose moments. We have 1,441 of them, minutes in a day, where we can make a difference in somebody else's life. One of the things that I learned in another instance was talking with a doctor who was the internal medicine doctor of the astronauts and their families at the Johnson Space Center outside of Houston, Texas, in the States. And this man was sitting in the front row of a program, and I asked him what he was doing there, and he said, "I'm here to help the astronauts make the transitions to the next phase of their life." We all go through transitions, whether they're retirement transitions or we go through multiple transitions. And I said, "Is that a big problem?" And he said, "Well, Mr. Leider, what would you do in the second half of your life if you'd walked on the moon in the first half?" And I said, wow, I mean, many of us have spent a lot of time getting educated, doing our work, and then we have to make a transition, like a retirement transition or a job transition or a relationship transition. We all have these purpose moments. And one of the things he also told me was that with the astronauts, there's something very interesting. It's called the overview effect. The overview effect is when you've seen the Earth from space like that, all of a sudden your perspective changes on life and what's important and boundaries and how it all fits together. What I'm trying to do here is give you an overview effect, a sense of the whole of your life. And there's been 536 people that have gone into space, 40 women, 12 have walked on the moon, and almost all of them, according to this doctor, have had some sense of what they now term the overview effect. So the overview effect is that seeing the big picture. What holds us back from really looking at purpose deeply are 3 myths, 3 things that hold us back. Now, purpose is a verb. Purpose is an action in the world. It's not something we write up and put on the wall and go back to work or go back to life. It's something we live moment to moment to moment, day after day. They're the choices we make, why we get up in the morning, but through those 1,441 moments throughout the day, we also go through it. So first of all, purpose is not a cause. You don't have to have a big cause to save the world, to save the planet, to do anything like that. Purpose is a mindset. It's a mindset that you want your life to matter and you want to leave your impact on a day-to-day basis. Secondly, purpose is not necessarily, it can be a revelation. It's a practice, and I'm going to share 3 practices with you, but it's a verb. It's something we do on a day-to-day basis. We find our sense of purpose by living and working purposefully, acting purposefully, and from that we get clearer about why we're here, what we're here to do with our lives and our work. And third, purpose is not a luxury. Purpose is not just for those that are financially secure or wealthy or well-educated. You find some of the most purposeful people who are in the lowest levels of income. So you look at purpose across the age span, across the lifespan, across the economics. It is not a luxury. It is fundamental to health, to healing, to happiness, to longevity. People who have a reason to get up in the morning tend to live 7 to 10 years longer. Not a bad statistic to go for, but it's really the quality of life we're looking at, the quality of our work lives and our leadership as well. So purpose, as I said, is powered. It's a verb. It's powered by different kinds of practices. And it's interesting, I write books. You're going to get the book, The Power of Purpose, I believe. But I've written 10 books, 3 bestsellers. I love writing books. I write every single day. I have a writing practice. And I love to go into bookstores. Every city I go to, one of the things, if I have the time, is I look for a good independent bookstore to go into and browse. To see if they're carrying my books, of course, but also just to see what's up in that city and what they're reading. And I walked into a bookstore recently in Denver, Colorado, and it's called The Tattered Cover, and there's an information desk and a young woman behind the desk, and I said to the young woman, "Can you tell me where the self-help section is?" And she looked at me and smiled and said, "Well, if I tell you, won't that defeat the whole purpose?" Very, very clever, very good line. I tell you that story because what I'm talking about here is really not self-help, even though it's called self-help in the bookstore. What we're talking about here is self-realization. The power of purpose is about realizing what's core to you and bringing that core out. My purpose is to help others unlock their purpose, not find it out there, not discover it out there, but find it in here and unlock it and bring it to life on a day-to-day, moment-to-moment basis. So let's look at 3 practices for unlocking your purpose. Practice number 1 is called the napkin test. Now, a lot of the world's great ideas have happened on the backs of napkins, where we sat down over a drink or over a cup of tea or coffee or something and spelled out something that we were really thinking about, and it just kind of poured out. And a lot of my ideas have come out on airplanes or in cafes around a napkin. So I call it the napkin test. Some people call it, or I call it sometimes, the Got a Minute School of Coaching. Because in this business, with 1 out of 3 people today in transitions, 1 out of 3 people in some sort of transition, people will say to me, "Richard, got a minute? Can you tell me what I should do with the rest of my life?" And I'll say, "Well, if you only got a minute, take out a napkin and write down this formula." So this is the universal formula. Gifts plus passions plus values equals calling, equals purpose. Calling is really the vocational, the work aspect of purpose. Are you clear about your gifts? Gifts are talents. but they're the talents that you most enjoy doing. Why go for pain when you can go for pleasure? Think about your gifts. If you have brothers and sisters, I'm sure you'll agree that your brothers and sisters' gifts are not the same as yours. When did you start to notice? Probably pretty early in life. These gifts often come out early in life. A gift has 4 characteristics to it. Number 1, a gift is something you love to do. Number 2, a gift is something that you do effortlessly and superbly, and others see you doing it effortlessly and superbly. And third, you can't recall learning it. I don't know, I've just been doing it my whole life. And my hand turns to it naturally. I don't even have a degree or a certificate into it, but I bring that part of myself to work every day and bring it into my role, even if it's not part of my job description. And fourth, I love learning more about it. So what are your gifts? What are your gifts? One of my gifts is awakening spirit. It's helping people to awaken or unlock their gifts, their spirit in many ways. And of course, you could say, well, that's what you do for a living, but it hasn't always been that way. There's many other gifts I have that my hand turns to naturally that I love to do that I haven't had a certificate in or a degree in. Secondly, passions. Are you using your gifts on things that you feel passionate about or interested in? Because if you get up in the morning and you get to go be you, self-realization, bring who you are to things you care about, now you're cooking. Now you've got a reason to get up. And the third thing is values. You could also say that's voice. You're working in a place where you have a fit, where you have a voice, where you can bring who you are to work on a day-to-day basis. That's courage. That's the courage that I think you're after with the value of courage and being the value of the year, so to speak. The courage of bringing your voice to work on a day-to-day basis. And as a leader, bringing out the voices of others. So gifts, passions, values, that's a mental model for you to think about. Why do you get up in the morning? Do you get to use your gifts on things you care about in an environment that fits your values? So that's the first practice, is to do the napkin test. Second practice, which you're going to do, is called the 2-minute practice, mind over mattress, the mattress test. Before you get out of bed in the morning, do this 2-minute practice. First of all, pause. Don't turn on your phone. Secondly, take 3 deep breaths. Why? When you take 3 deep breaths, it really centers you. It brings all of that distraction into the center, into the core. So pause, 3 deep breaths, and then picture somebody whose life you want to impact this day. Just in your mind, go through, what are you going to do this day? Who needs a hug? Who needs a kind word? Who needs a listening? And on and on. Simple little things you can do during the day, during 1,441 purpose moments during the day, to stop and make a difference in people's lives. So the practice, the 2-minute practice, the mattress test, is to train your mind and train your intentions every day to make a difference in other people's lives. So that's the second practice. The third practice is the mirror test. I already gave you the universal default purpose, and that universal default purpose was to grow and give. Now what I'm asking you to do is to write that on a Post-it and put it on your mirror. And when you get up in the morning, as you're brushing your teeth and getting ready to go through the day, picture again, how am I going to grow and give today? Kind of like the mattress test, but a little bit different spin on that. And then, at the end of the day, as you're brushing your teeth before you go to bed, hold yourself accountable. How did I do today? Did I grow today in certain ways? Did I give today in certain ways? If you're growing and giving, if you do this for 1 straight week, 7 straight days, you'll notice the power of purpose. You'll notice what happens when you bring your full intention and your awareness to your daily practices and have the courage to really step forward and to make a difference in other people's lives. So finally, how about a purpose partner? Part of the checkup is this. Everybody here is an experiment of one, but you don't have to go it alone. You are an experiment of one. Everybody's unique, but isolation is fatal. Going it alone is an incredibly bad idea. So pick a purpose partner, somebody who can be a committed listener for you, you can talk to and be transparent with, work out things. I often say to leaders, and I work a lot in leadership development programs, every leader needs a sounding board, needs a number of people on their sounding board who they can work things through with. Going it alone as a leader is an incredibly, not only arrogant, but not a good idea. We are all experiments of one. Isolation is fatal. Going it alone, even for leaders who are very skilled at what they do, not a good idea. Who's your purpose partner? Who is your committed listener? And on the flip side of that, who would pick you as their purpose partner? Was your spouse or partner, even your kids or friends? Can they have that kind of committed listener conversation with you? Are you a legitimate purpose partner for them? So let's sum it all up by saying this. The American essayist E.B. White said this. He said, "I arise in the morning, torn between a desire to improve or save the world and a desire to enjoy or savor the world. This makes it hard to plan the day." Well, in all due respect to E.B. White, I think he had it right. A good life is savoring and saving. Not literally saving the world, but metaphorically it's making a contribution as well as enjoying life for its own sake. The balance of life is saving and savoring both. So I think E.B. White had it right. So I hope you found that this has been useful in stepping back and reflecting, looking at areas where you want to be more courageous perhaps, and looking at how you matter and how you want to matter in the world. What is your sense of purpose? What is your why? Why do you get up in the morning? So the bottom line here is to unlock your why now. Unlock the power of purpose. Thank you for listening.